building a blueprint, and the outline of the building on the blueprint was exactly the same as the Sioux family ancestral home that had been burned down 10 years ago. Could she really be that little beggar from back then? A thought popped into the city guard's mind. But the woman before him was absolutely beautiful, without a single flaw. I still remember the poor little beggar with a horrifying scar on his face. Something's not right. Those clear eyes began to overlap with those of the little beggar from 10 years ago. The city guard looked up again, but the woman had vanished without a trace. Chapter 139, Final Chapter. In Suzhou, across the Suzhou River that clearly separates the rich and poor, the other half presents a completely different picture. Reflected in the river, prosperity and decay coexist. Mu Yungui returned silently to the dilapidated alley. He stood in front of the weathered wooden door, a hint of surprise flashing in his eyes. He had assumed that the courtyard, weathered by decades of wind and rain, would have long since turned into ruins. But the scene before him was beyond his expectations. He pushed open the door and entered. The objects in the yard were still arranged neatly as before, and the weeds were not taller than his boots, indicating that someone had been taking care of the place. "Master Immortal," a trembling voice called out to him from behind. Mu Yungui turned around and saw a tall man with a slight stubble standing not far away. The man was holding the hand of a little girl of about 4 or 5 years old. Mu Yungui noticed that the man's large hand was missing a finger. Upon seeing Mu Yungui, the man's face was filled with shock and joy. "Immortal Master, you're back. Long Tao, did you clean this house?" Mu Yungui asked. Long Tao nodded repeatedly. "Yes. After the Immortal Master left Suzhou, Lu Ren and I would come to your house from time to clean it up, thinking that the Immortal Master might come back." As he spoke, he tugged at the little girl beside him. "Oh, right, Immortal Master. This is my daughter. Her name is Lu Ling." Mu Yungui looked at the little girl. Her clear eyes held a hint of fear, yet she curiously examined the handsome young man in black before her. Fearing that Mu Yungui would be displeased, Long Tao hurriedly said, "Come Linger kowtow to the Immortal Master." Upon hearing this, the girl, though not understanding why her father was so flustered, was always sensible and obediently prepared to kneel down. Just as she was about to kneel down, Mu Yungui bent down, gently touched her head and shook his head. The little girl raised her head, her clear eyes gazing intently at the beautiful fairy master before her. "A child isn't some heinous, wicked, bullying beast. Why should he kowtow to me?" Mu Yungui rolled his eyes at Long Tao. Long Tao understood and hurriedly explained, "Immortal Master, since then Lu Ren and I have always kept your instructions in mind, and we have never done a bad thing in more than 10 years. He raised 4 fingers and looked up at the sky with a devout expression, making a vow. Mu Yungui listened and nodded. Seeing that Mu Yungui seemed satisfied, Long Tao breathed a sigh of relief, only to see Mu Yungui's aura suddenly change, his gaze fixed on him like a knife. "You really haven't done anything wrong. You have a clear conscience." As soon as he finished speaking, the temperature around him plummeted, and countless killing intents filled the air around Long Tao. The little girl sneezed, not understanding why, but simply curious about why the weather had suddenly turned cold. Long Tao dared not breathe, the aura of imminent death enveloping him once again after 10 years. He believed that if Mu Yungui had a single thought, he would surely die on the spot. He gritted his teeth and said with a death-defying air, "I have a clear conscience." Mu Yungui suddenly smiled, and the murderous intent around him instantly dissipated. "That's well said, but I'll have to see for myself to decide." He stood up, rubbed his face, and then pinched the girl's cheek. "It's getting cold. Take the child home for dinner. I'll go buy some food, too. Beggar's chicken is good." Mu Yungui waved his hand. "By the way, please look after this courtyard for me, thanks." With that, he vanished in an instant, leaving only the little girl's surprised expression. After listening, Long Tao, a burly man in his 40s, suddenly had tears welling up in his eyes. In May, the weather in Suzhou is unpredictable. Even though a heavy rain had just fallen at noon, dark clouds were gathering again, making the sky dark and gloomy. Mu Yungui vanished and reappeared on Chicken Tail Street. Taking advantage of the tail end of the market closing time, he managed to buy a lotus leaf wrapped in a fragrant aroma. Mu Yungui looked towards a steamed bun shop, where a woman with slightly graying temples was tidying up the shop with a child of about 10 years old. The woman looked at her grown-up child with eyes full of joy and emotion. Mu Yungui watched this scene for a moment, but did not disturb the other party. Pushing open the courtyard gate and returning to his own hut, Mu Yungui plopped down in front of the door, feeling a headache coming on as he thought about what had happened at the Tai Xuan sword sect. What was originally thought to be a simple matter of revenge turned out to be a connection between the Shen family father and daughter and the demon clan in the north. A demon king at the tribulation transcending stage was willing to sacrifice his cultivation to tear open a spatial rift to save Shen Kinghen. Fortunately, that swordsman from the north intervened at that time. Mu Yungui thought of Shen Kinghen's ancient phoenix bloodline and the demon emperor who had not yet revealed his full true form. A conjecture suddenly popped into my head. Shen Ling Xiao, you don't actually have such heavy tastes, do you? I've heard of Mu Yungui, the one associated with the Japanese grass and the Japanese rabbit, but, alas, the northern realm, the demon emperor. Mu Yungui sighed and reached out to pick up the beggar's chicken he had bought. Never mind, the guy up north told me to go back in 2 or 3 years, so I can still steal a break from my busy schedule Tilda. Since things have come to this, let's eat. The roast chicken I bought for dinner had gotten a little cold. Mu Yungui lightly tapped his fingertip, and a wisp of spiritual energy transformed into flames. In an instant, the roast chicken regained its golden color, and its aroma filled the entire room. At that moment, a strong wind suddenly rose in the sky, and dark clouds pressed down overhead, as if a torrential downpour was about to begin. Mu Yungui's thin shirt billowed, but due to his profound cultivation, he was no longer as afraid of the cold as before. Knock, knock, knock. The knocking on the door suddenly rang out. Mu Yungui frowned slightly, wondering if Long Tao would ask for another free meal. Holding the roast chicken in one hand, Mu Yungui got up and walked towards the slightly dilapidated wooden door. The moment the door opened, his gaze met that of the person outside. Outside the door, the girl in the white dress tilted her head slightly, waiting for Mu Yungui to open the door. Ryuachin. He was somewhat surprised, still holding the freshly heated roast chicken in his hand. He had assumed she was still busy rebuilding the Su family ancestral home, so her appearance caught him off guard. The girl wore a white dress, and her long black hair was blown by the wind. That stunningly beautiful face was filled with tenderness in her eyes, yet also carried a touch of playfulness. A moment later, the girl leaned forward slightly, her eyebrows furrowed, feigning pitifulness, and said softly, "Young master, could you please provide some food? By the way, if possible, it would be even better if you could take me in this time." Okay. The end. I'll probably write a few more side stories and mini-stories, like Xian Ryu-chan after her transformation into a villain in an what-if storyline, or the two of them traveling back to the modern era. Let's summarize. First of all, thank you to all the readers who have read this book. Thank you. I'm truly grateful to everyone who has been following along. Can you really tolerate an author updating only once every 3 or 4 days? I have my doubts. It's been serialized since last June, more than half a year now. For Tomato's author, cutting off a book isn't a big deal, but after considering it each time, he still persists, wanting to give a story an ending. Fortunately, I finally finished writing it, albeit intermittently. This is my second book. Although it has many shortcomings, it's still an improvement over my first one. Writing might continue, but I doubt I'll start a third book anytime soon. If I do write one, it'll probably be something lighter like fantasy, comedy, imaginative stories, or romance. Chapter 140, The Strange Woman. Young master, then I won't stand on ceremony. Jiang Ryuachin walked forward and suddenly hugged Mu Yungui. Because Mu Yungui was still holding the beggar's chicken, he was caught off guard and let the girl get close to him. The girl squinted, a sly smile playing on her lips. Like a lazy kitten, she snuggled against Mu Yungui, her hair gently brushing against his neck, sending a tingling sensation through him. Master, I like it, Tilda. Jiang Ryuachin's voice was soft and sweet, with a hint of coquetry, as if she enjoyed such intimate gestures. Mu Yungui looked down at her, a hint of helplessness flashing in his eyes, yet he couldn't hide his doting affection. After confirming their feelings for each other, the stunningly beautiful girl in his arms would occasionally become overly dependent on Mu Yungui. Fortunately, Mu Yungui gradually got used to it. Mu Yungui chuckled awkwardly, her ears turning slightly red, seemingly unable to handle such a direct expression. Master, do you actually not like Ryuachin? Jiang Ryuachin suddenly raised her head, blinked her watery eyes, and looked at him with feigned grievance. Mu Yungui was taken aback and was about to explain when he saw the girl in his arms lean closer, staring intently at his somewhat flustered expression, as if trying to find some flaw in his face. Tilda, Jiang Ryuachin suddenly laughed out loud, her eyes full of smugness. Mu Yungui gave a helpless twitch of his lips, sighed softly, and said jokingly, Jiang Ryuachin, you've learned to tease me now, haven't you? He then reached out and pinched her fair and delicate cheek, the force not strong, but with a hint of punishment. As the girl stepped inside, Mu Yungui casually closed the door, which was swaying in the wind. The moment the door closed, the howling wind vanished instantly. The faded red lanterns under the eaves stopped swaying, and the wind began to subside within the courtyard. The two then casually sat down under the eaves. This time I want to eat with my master. Jiang Ryuachin recalled the scene when she first met her master, and the help she received when she was most helpless and desperate. The two looked at the strong wind outside the courtyard and the somewhat gloomy sky, and then had a simple dinner. Large raindrops began to fall from the sky, and then, a few moments later, a torrential downpour began. The two gazed at the rain, and Jiang Ryuachin leaned against Mu Yungui's shoulder, swinging her legs as her eyes softened. At that moment, the two of them simply gazed at the rain. "It really is just like a dream," she murmured softly, her voice almost inaudible. "What's wrong with Ryuachin?" Mu Yungui looked down at her, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "I can't believe I can really find happiness." Jiang Ryuachin's voice trembled slightly, as if these words had been hidden in her heart for a long time and had finally found an outlet. "Master, over the years, I have always regarded you as the person I respect most, but I don't know when it started. That respect gradually turned into another emotion. I tried to suppress it, but I found that I simply couldn't control it. Isn't Ryuachin actually a greedy person?" Mu Yungui propped himself up with his hands, gazing at the sky. "When I first met Ryuachin, I only thought of using her to complete my revenge plan, but later, I became increasingly confused about my own feelings. Until I finally mustered the courage to confront my own feelings. Now that we've met, we should cherish everything we have." "Master," the girl murmured softly, her eyes glazed over. Mu Yungui slowly lowered his head, the distance between them drawing ever closer. He could see his own reflection in the girl's eyes, feel her slightly trembling body, and smell her faint, delicate fragrance. At this moment, the ambiguity of their feelings had reached its peak. Jiang Ryuachin's long eyelashes trembled slightly on her beautiful face, and then her eyes became hazy. The two began to draw closer and closer. Knock, knock. The knocking on the door abruptly tore through the rain. The wooden door creaked open, revealing a man and a woman. The man in the blue robe still had lingering rain mist clinging to his shoulders. He casually brushed the raindrops off his shoulders with his slender fingers, and the gyukin on his back gleamed with a warm luster in the dim light. "Excuse me." Ning Xianqi couldn't help but complain. "Brother Mu's ancestral home does have a certain rustic charm." Kjai followed closely behind, the silver threads embroidered on her black skirt faintly visible in the candlelight, and only then did Ning Xianqi release her hand from his. The two people under the eaves bowed slightly. "Fellow Taoist Mu, Sister Ryuachin, we apologize for our intrusion." Before she could finish speaking, she suddenly stopped. Under the eaves, the lingering blush behind Jiang Ryuachin's ears was particularly noticeable, while Mu Yungui's eyes still held a trace of embarrassment that he hadn't yet managed to conceal. Kjai blinked, and a meaningful smile unconsciously appeared on her lips. At this moment, Ning Xianqi also realized what was happening, and looked guilty as he tentatively asked, "Can we go out now?" Mu Yun composed himself and changed the subject, saying, "Ahem. Let's talk about it after we've lived in the Tai Xuan sword sect for a few years." Ning Xianqi sat under the eaves like the other two. "You know about Kjai and me? We can't go back to Qin Valley for the time being. If we show our faces again, we'll probably be arrested and taken back. There are too many people in the sword sect, and staying there for too long will only cause trouble." "I see." Mu Yungui nodded slightly, not worried about the two's situation. Although the Valley Master of Qin Valley was strict, he was ultimately soft-hearted towards Ning Xianqi, his only son. He thought that there would be no serious punishment if they were taken back, but it seemed very likely that they would be locked up in Qin Valley for 10 years or so. "So what are your plans next, Brother Ning and Miss?" Ning Xianqi plopped down next to Mu Yungui and pushed a pot of wine towards him. "Jir said she wants to travel to the 4 continents, and her first stop is the Spirit Flower Sea." He turned to look at Kjai, his eyes filled with a hint of doting affection. Kjai gave a soft mmm, her earlobes slightly flushed. She lowered her head, fiddling with the silver thread embroidery on her cuffs, her voice gentle. "I heard that when the flowers bloom, the entire valley turns purple." Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachin exchanged a glance, both seeing surprise in each other's eyes. The cold and aloof, unsmiling zither player they remembered was now showing a hint of girlish shyness. Jiang Ryuachin moved closer to Kjai and cheerfully took her hand, saying, "Sister has become so frank." Kjai helplessly rubbed her face, but a faint smile played on his lips. It's not exactly frank, but after understanding the young master's feelings, I also saw my own feelings clearly. She paused, her voice so soft it was almost inaudible. Although I'm a zither player I've secretly thought about, living well and staying by his side. However, Jiang Ryuachin suddenly remembered something and tilted her head to ask, isn't the Spirit Flower Sea in the southern frontier? How did it end up in Suzhou? Ning Xianqi and Kjai exchanged a glance. Then Ning Xianqi began to recount what happened when they left the sword sect. Originally, we planned to go directly to the southern frontier after leaving the Tai Xuan sword sect, but we hadn't gone far when we encountered a strange woman on the road. A strange woman? Mu Yungui frowned slightly. Yes, she was following us, but we noticed her, Kjai continued. After being discovered, she didn't hide. Instead, she followed us openly. What does this have to do with coming to find us? Mu Yungui asked, puzzled. Kjai ignored Mu Yungui, and instead turned her head and suddenly leaned close to Jiang Ryuachin's ear, whispering something. Upon hearing this, Jiang Ryuachin's face instantly turned bright red. Even her ears turned crimson. Before Mu Yungui could react to what was happening, Ning Xian stood up, his face serious. She said you two are getting married, so we're here for the wedding banquet. As Mu Yungui listened, he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of wine, and the wine pot in his hand fell to the ground with a clatter. Chapter 140 won the 3-year term. At that moment, Mu Yungui seemed to be struck by lightning, instantly jumping up from the spot, his face filled with shock and astonishment. His gaze quickly shifted to his young apprentice. The girl's face was already flushed. No, I'm getting married? Why am I only finding out now? Mu Yungui was filled with countless questions. Although he and Jiang Ryuachin had already confirmed their relationship, the suddenness of the marriage caught him off guard. He pondered for a moment, and a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. Without hesitation, he snapped his fingers. With his movement, the courtyard gate swung open with a bang, and a sharp sword aura pierced through the rain, flying straight towards the outside. The sword aura was as cold as frost, stopping precisely an inch from a person's forehead, chilling yet devoid of killing intent. As expected, Mu Yungui looked at the person outside the door, rubbed his temples helplessly, and said with a hint of understanding and exhaustion, I knew it was you. Ning Xianqi and Kjai followed his gaze, and saw a woman in a purple dress, holding an oil paper umbrella standing outside the door. Ning Xianqi couldn't help but say, yes, it's this strange fellow Taoist Mu Jin, so you know him too. The woman, realizing she had been discovered, showed no embarrassment whatsoever. With a swift movement, she teleported into the courtyard, her oil paper umbrella twirling gently, scattering raindrops. Her alluring vertical pupils blinked, and she smiled slightly, her gaze sweeping over Ning Xianqi and Kjai, a silent greeting in itself. He raised an eyebrow in a mocking manner, his tone tinged with a hint of teasing. Oh, brother Mu, did I guess wrong? I thought you secretly left the sword sect and returned to Suzhou to get married in your hometown. Turns out that wasn't the case. Mu Yungui did not answer directly, but instead asked, Brother Yi, you didn't appear here just to satisfy some of your strange and perverse tastes, leaving Kinger and Bai Nian unattended in Magu, did you? During their last encounter in the Ink Valley, Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachin learned about this 10,000-year-old demon's strange hobby from Chen Kinger and Bai Nian. I like to crouch in the shadows and quietly observe other people's lives. Back in Magu, he had paid attention to the lives of a pair of childhood sweethearts, the entanglement between a princess and a guard in a neighboring dynasty, or the love story between a Taoist priest with low cultivation and a fox demon. He seemed particularly fascinated by these unusual relationships. He smiled and said in a relaxed tone, perhaps Kinger and Bai Nian's strength is not as weak as Brother Mu thinks. Just as Mu Yungui was about to speak, Yi continued, besides, it was their idea for me to come to the Tai Xuan sword sect with you before Tilda. She paused, then put her hand on her chest and said smugly, although I am only at the nascent soul stage, it is not too difficult for me to help you stop 1 or 2 nascent soul cultivators. But in the end, I didn't really help much. Back in Magu, the resolute expressions on your faces told me you were up to something big. After some reasoning, I was able to figure it out roughly. His tone carried a hint of smugness, as if he had everything under control. She sighed softly, feigning emotion. Sigh, I still remember when I told those 2 little ones about this. Bai Nian clung to my leg, crying her eyes out, insisting I help. The 2 were stunned for a moment, feeling somewhat guilty for thinking such a bad thing about the person in front of them. Jiang Ryuachin said apologetically, Sister Mujin, I'm sorry. Yi waved his hand and laughed. It's all right, I just wanted to observe you from the shadows too. Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachin. Yi asked again, aren't you going to think about it? Mu Yungui hadn't actually thought about marriage that far ahead. For him, such an important matter wasn't something to rush. He turned to look at Jiang Ryuachin, his gaze questioning, as if waiting for her response. The girl's clear eyes brightened slightly, and an expectant look appeared on her face, as if she had 1,000 words hidden in her heart. However, after a moment, she seemed to have made up her mind, gently pouted and shook her head. I can't make things difficult for my master in this matter, she silently told herself. Love doesn't depend on being together every day, she said softly, her tone carrying a hint of firmness and relief. He took in their expressions and, seeing that they had made their decision, said nothing more. He simply smiled slightly, as if he already knew everything. Seeing this, Mu Yungui explained. Do you all remember the demon emperor's true form that Ryuachin used when she killed Shen Qinghen at the last moment in the Tai Xuan sword sect? He paused, then continued. 6 months ago, the sect leader of the Northern Sword Sect sent a letter to the Tai Xuan sword sect afterward. The letter mentioned that the demon emperor was willing to tear through space to save Shen Qinghen, and there was something more to it than met the eye. Therefore, he invited me to make a trip to the northern border within the next year or two to find out the truth. Mu Yungui spoke solemnly, his gaze sweeping over the three men before he bowed deeply. This bow was both a promise to his words and a heartfelt expression of gratitude for the help his friends had given him. Therefore, in about 3 years, once this matter is settled, I will definitely invite you all. Oh, 3 years, the three said in unison. Huh. Before he could finish speaking, he looked up and found that the 3 people in front of him had disappeared without a trace. Brother Mu, although I have great confidence in your strength, please be careful on your journey to the Northern Territory. Until we meet again. Ning Xianqi's voice came from afar, carrying a hint of concern and nonchalance. Ryuachin, take care, see you later. Zhai's voice was gentle. It's been a long time since I've seen Kinger. His voice carried a hint of nostalgia. It came quickly and left quickly. The 3 voices gradually faded into the distance, and in a short while they could no longer be heard in the night of Suzhou, leaving only Mu Yungui and Jiang Ryuachin standing in the courtyard, looking at each other in bewilderment. The 2 then smiled at each other. Mu Yungui gazed at the drizzling rain, the raindrops like curtains, gently tapping on the eaves, making a soft, pattering sound. He glanced sideways, and his gaze fell on Jiang Ryuachin beside him. The girl's profile appeared exceptionally soft in the rain, her features clear and perfect, like a meticulously crafted, exquisite painting. Her gaze was somewhat unfocused, as if she were lost in her own thoughts, pondering something unknown. Mu Yungui was momentarily captivated by her expression, a tender feeling welling up within him. Is Ryuachin thinking about what just happened? He asked softly, his tone tinged with concern. Jiang Ryuachin's thoughts were pulled back by his voice. She was slightly taken aback, then raised her head and looked at Mu Yungui with a firm gaze, as if she had made up her mind. She took a deep breath and said earnestly and solemnly, the 3-year period. Ryuachin will work hard to cultivate herself within 3 years and learn how to become a qualified wife. Mu Yungui. As night fell, the 2 were prepared, and with the help of magic, they frequently tidied up the entire courtyard, transforming it from simple to frugal. Inside the room, the young girl was busy. She removed the old, worn-out bed and replaced it with a brand new one. The bed was covered with a soft brocade quilt, exuding a faint fragrance, as if adding a touch of life to the small room. Mu Yungui appeared above Sioux City, spreading his divine sense and looking at the myriad lights of the city, but he did not notice the presence of any other cultivators. Afterwards, Mu Yungui returned to the courtyard, his gaze sweeping around. He recalled his wish when he was reborn, to lie down peacefully. Now it seemed that he had achieved that wish. Mu Yungui nodded in satisfaction. He summoned a talisman in his hand, and the sword talisman set up a sword array around the courtyard. Ryuachin, let's go to sleep for now. Mu Yungui pushed open the door, intending to rest, when he saw the girl sitting gently on the edge of the bed, wearing a loose, soft, off-white nightgown. The girl was taking off the red ribbon that tied her ponytail. As she moved, her long black hair cascaded down her back, pressing against her thin nightgown and slipping down to reveal her tender, milky shoulders. The candlelight flickered, casting shadows on the girl and outlining her slender figure through the light and shadow. The elegant curves extended from her shoulders to her waist, and her slender waist, which could be encircled by one hand, appeared even more graceful in the candlelight. Jiang Ryuachin seemed to sense Mu Yungui's gaze and gently turned her head. The blush on the girl's face hadn't faded, and her eyes held a hint of shyness and tenderness as she responded softly. Chapter 142 ending. The rain has stopped. The shops in the city gradually became lively, with shouts and conversations rising and falling, as if the rain of the night had washed away the dust and brought new life. However, the small courtyard in the lower town was in a remote location, with few pedestrians around, and was quite quiet. Only occasionally could a few drops of residual rainwater fall from the bluestone steps under the eaves, making a soft drip-drip sound. Mu Yungui slowly opened his eyes, and what came into view was an absolutely beautiful sleeping face. Beside her, Jiang Ryuachen's long, black hair was spread out on the pillow, smooth as silk. Her eyelashes were long and thick, trembling slightly with her breath, making one reluctant to disturb her. Mu Yungui stared at the ceiling, blinked, and estimated the time in his mind. He had probably slept for dozens of hours. As cultivators, after reaching their level, they actually didn't need such a long rest at all. However, last night, the two of them completely relaxed their minds and fell into a deep sleep in the most natural way, just like ordinary people. This complete relaxation made Mu Yungui feel more comfortable than ever before. Even the most top-tier elixirs or opportunities cannot compare to the blissful feeling of mental relaxation and peace of mind at this moment. He turned his head and quietly looked at Jiang Ryuachen's sleeping face, but he still couldn't suppress the impulse in his heart. He gently moved closer, his movements careful, afraid of waking the sleeping girl. Then, he lowered his head and placed a soft kiss on Jiang Ryuachen's forehead. The girl noticed the noise, slowly opened her sleepy eyes and murmured softly, "Master, is it already midday? You slept for a really long time." As she spoke, she tried to sit up. Just then, a soft blanket suddenly appeared on her shoulders, carrying a faint warmth. "Be careful not to catch a cold." Mu Yungui's voice was gentle, with a hint of concern. Seeing that the girl was still asleep, he thought for a moment and then casually pulled over the blanket next to him and gently covered her shoulders. Jiang Ryuachen was slightly taken aback, then muttered softly, "We are cultivators. We won't catch a cold so easily." As she spoke, she glanced at Mu Yungui. However, what met her eyes was his strong, well-proportioned upper body, his skin glowing healthily in the morning light. Jiang Ryuachen immediately realized something and looked down at herself. Her face instantly flushed red, all sleepiness vanishing. She frantically pulled the blanket over herself, wrapping herself tightly like a frightened little animal. "Master, master." Looking at his usually aloof, ethereal, and flawless little disciple, Mu Yungui couldn't help but chuckle at his current appearance. If Jiang Ryuachen has any flaws, it's probably that she's always a bit slow to react after waking up, but that also makes her seem exceptionally adorable. A girl's voice, barely audible, came from within the clump. "Master, last night we..." Mu Yungui immediately replied, "I will follow Ryuachen's will." Upon hearing this, the girl recalled what had happened last night. Now that things had come to this, she could no longer hide her shameful state. So the girl simply spread out the warm blankets and covered Mu Yungui with them as well. There was no clothing between their skin, and they felt each other's body heat. Jiang Ryuachen hugged Mu Yungui and pleaded, "Please, master, forget what happened last night." Mu Yungui, now subdued, said helplessly, "So, Ryuachen, why did you push me down again?" This is... This is punishment for master." Chirp tilde. Noon. At this time, the two people in the courtyard had already gotten up. "It's not early at all." Jiang Ryuachen gently tied up her cascading black hair and draped it over her left shoulder. If she was like a pear blossom bud before, pure, innocent, and reserved, then she is now like a pear blossom in full bloom, pure white with a touch of charm and more mature. On the table, Mu Yungui had already laid out the pastries he had bought from the street vendor. Steaming hot buns, golden and crispy fried dough sticks, and a bowl of congee, simple yet comforting. On Jiang Ryuachen's side, there was a cup of steaming brown sugar water, its faint, sweet aroma filling the air. Mu Yungui sat opposite her, his gaze gently falling on Jiang Ryuachen, and the corners of his mouth unconsciously turned up slightly. Jiang Ryuachen noticed his gaze, and the blush that had just faded from her face quietly crept back up. She picked up the cup of brown sugar water, took a small sip, and tried to use the cup to cover her slightly burning cheeks. "Master, why are you smiling at Ryuachen?" Upon hearing this, Mu Yungui's smile deepened, but he feigned nonchalance and said, "No." Jiang Ryuachen took a sip of brown sugar water and turned her head away. "So you're thinking about Ryuachen's embarrassing behavior last night?" Mu Yungui shook his head. "I just feel that I am very happy right now, and that's enough." The girl then raised her head, looked at her master, and confessed, Please don't dislike Ryuachin in the future, master. In that small fishing village by the sea, people with their own thoughts lived together harmoniously. The girls enjoyed the connection of leaning on each other. The men quietly guarded everything, and the children held a newspaper in their hands, thinking that when they grew up, they would go and see the boy who had become famous not long ago but had quickly disappeared. On a celestial ferry, a young man carrying a zither conjured a red rose from his hand using a newly learned mortal magic trick and handed it to a girl in a black dress sitting opposite him. The girl gently took the rose, covering her face and laughing, but she was amused by the young man's clumsy performance. Seeing this, the young man's face softened. Unlike the sex of immortal cultivators, the girl in green removed her glasses and let out a long sigh of relief at the new formation she had spent months researching. Then, she smiled with satisfaction. Hearing the voices, a middle-aged man entered, pulling a little girl along, unable to hide his joy and pride. On her way home, Mu Jin thought of Mu Yun-gui and Jiang Ryu-chan, and wondered if their next meeting would bring even more fun, which made her even happier, because she knew the story was still going on. The end.